So it's the weekend, Saturday, July 22nd and Sunday, July 23rd, 2017. You are listening to Inception Radio Network, voice of the fringe majority. This is Carol Carl off the beaten path for the UFO headline news. Celestial displays don't get the weekend off, and here's what you can see this weekend. From earthsky.org, here's the headline, See Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown. Tonight, look for the constellation Corona Borealis, which is also called the Northern Crown. You're going to need a dark sky to see it, but if you've got one, this constellation is fairly easy to pick out because it makes the shape of the letter C. To see this famous C-shaped assemblage of stars from the Northern Hemisphere during the evening hours in July, you'll have to be looking high overhead. For you gentle listeners in the Southern Hemisphere, this constellation is low in the northern sky. Corona Borealis constellation is distinctive. It looks like a half circle, hence that C shape, in the middle of which is a white jewel of a star called Alphecca, or Gemma. Let's spell Alphecca. It's Alphecca. Gemma, well, that's pretty easy. Two more bright stars are added to this crown. In fact, the crown is located more or less along a line between them. Arcturus in the constellation Bootes the herdsman, and Vega in the constellation Lyra the harp. Arcturus has already passed its highest point in the evening this time of year, and it's slowly descending to the west. Vega is still high in the east on July evenings. And with dark skies, you'll notice the orange color of Arcturus and Vega's bright blue-white tinge. Corona Borealis can be found between these two stars, although it's actually closer to Vega. By the way, the meaning of the Latin star named Gemma should be obvious. This star is the gem of the Northern Crown. But the star is also called Alphecca, from an ancient Arabic phrase meaning the bright one of the dish. Gemma, aka Alphecca, is an eclipsing binary system. It consists of a smaller sun-like star that passes in front of a brighter star every 17.4 days, as seen from our earthly vantage point. So here's ye old bottom line that Earth Sky always provides. On these July evenings, look for Corona Borealis's graceful semicircle of stars. In between those two bright stars, Arcturus and Vega. See if you can include in your weekend a glimpse at that night sky. Here's this for all of us Google Earth enthusiasts. It's from the WashingtonPost.com. Headline, Google Street View's latest destination, the International Space Station. That comprehensive terrestrial mapping system, Google Space, has gone extraterrestrial, allowing users to peer inside the International Space Station from their computer 248 miles below. You've got 360-degree panoramic views. The street image, it's that thing where you can get up close, was captured by Frenchman Thomas Pesquet, the astronaut with the European Space Agency. He just spent 6 months aboard the ISS before returning to Earth in June. Google Street View, that you may or may not be familiar with, is featured in Google Maps and Google World. It was launched in 2007 and quickly expanded locations around the globe, including places as remote as Mount Everest Base Camp and as offbeat as Scotland's Loch Ness. Monster watching. The vast majority of Street View's photography is shot by a vehicle whose movement is available to fans online. Oh, and speaking of Loch Ness, that search can move online now, thanks to Google. Google's foray into space is the first time Street View imagery was captured beyond planet Earth. In a blog post about his experience, Thomas Pesquet wrote that, quote, it was difficult to find the words or take a picture that accurately describes the feeling of being in space. Working with Google on my latest mission, I captured Street View imagery to show what the International Space Station looks like from the inside and share what it's like to look down on Earth from space, end quotes. The virtual tour allows users to peek into areas where astronauts eat, exercise, work, and even bathe. Thomas Pesquet's imagery reveals an environment that may look a bit cramped and chaotic, if not altogether dizzying, to humans anchored on Earth, but some of the scenes from inside the International Space Station are downright mesmerizing. This broadcaster confesses to spending way too much time there yesterday. The images were captured using the DSLR cameras and then stitched together back on Earth to create those panoramic views. Pascat noted that the ISS is a busy place, with 6 crew members working and researching 12 hours a day. He wrote, quote, "There are a lot of obstacles up there, and we had limited time to capture the imagery, so we had to be confident that our approach would work. Oh, and then there's that whole zero gravity thing," end quotes. Floating through the International Space Station online, you'll notice clickable dots with detailed descriptions of that space and its objects. That'll help viewers understand what they're looking at. Pascat noticed this is the first time annotations, those, quote, "helpful little notes that pop up as you explore the ISS," end quotes, have been added to Street View imagery. The ISS is a, quote, "large spacecraft," end quotes, that orbits around the Earth. It goes at more than 1,705,000 miles per hour, home for astronauts from around the world. It's made up of many pieces. Those pieces were constructed by astronauts beginning in 1998. By 2000, as more pieces of the station were added, the station was ready for people, according to NASA. Portions of the station are connected via modules known as nodes. Quote, "The first crew arrived November 2nd, 2000, NASA writes. People have lived on the space station ever since. Over time, more pieces have been added. NASA and its partners around the world finished the space station in 2011, end quotes. NASA compares the inside of the station to the inside of a house, noting that the structure, which weighs almost 1 million pounds and covers an area the size of a football field, has 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a gymnasium, and a big bay window. What, no fireplace? The station houses labs from the United States, Russia, Japan, and Europe. Says Pascat, quote, "We can collect data on the Earth's oceans, atmosphere, and land surface. We can conduct experiments and studies that we wouldn't be able to do from Earth. Things like monitoring how the human body reacts to microgravity, solving mysteries of the immune system, studying cyclones to alert populations and governments when a storm is approaching, or even monitoring marine litter, that rapidly increasing amount of waste found in our oceans," end quotes. Several times a week, Mission Control at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston determines where Earthlings can spot the station from the ground below from thousands of locations all over the globe. To find out the best time to see the station from your town, you can click a link that you'll find later at ufoheadlinenews.com. What a great way to spend part of your weekend. Enjoy. Yup, it's the weekend. It's off the beaten path for the UFO Headline News. We do the stories that are slightly outside the box, a little off the beaten path, in other words, of our regular weekly coverage for the UFO Headline News. Although we do have that sense, as we're sure lots of gentle listeners do, that everything is pretty much connected. Oh, here's a Hollywood connection. Headline: In Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, the International Space Station evolves into interstellar metropolis. Oh, what a perfect segue from that last story. This one is written by Doris Elin Salazar. She writes for Space.com. In the new adventure movie, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, directed by Luc Besson, the title city Alpha has a present-day origin, the International Space Station. The opening of Valerian, a film inspired by the popular French comic series Valérian et Laureline, created by Pierre Christin and Jean-Claude Mézières, has a scene that showcases the International Space Station as it grows into a galactic United Nations, hosting meet and greets with representatives from Earth and later aliens. It grows physically, too, until it is large enough that it needs to be moved out of low Earth orbit. The International Space Station's evolution is a plausible one. The station has a history of bringing cultures together to build itself and to exchange ideas. In Valerian, the first greeting in the montage takes place in the not-too-distant year of 2020, where 2 human astronauts are shown embracing their colleagues and lovers, and as we advance in time, we see increasingly strange aliens introduce themselves to humans on board the station. Certainly, the international crews that have continuously occupied the existing ISS since 2000 would have milder reactions to meeting foreign astronauts than hypothetically meeting alien life forms. However, the International Space Station was nevertheless groundbreaking in its ability to unite 5 space agencies to expand scientific research possibilities and to mend older nationalistic divisions. Many of the space programs involved with the station, NASA, United States, Roscosmos, Russia, CSA, Canada, JAXA, Japan, and the European Space Agency, Europe, include countries that have warred with one another in the last century. Early concepts for the ISS had the space station taking the shape of a giant wheel. Wernher von Braun developed the International Space Station concept back in 1952. His concept was round in order to provide simulated gravity through rotation, with a capacity to house dozens of scientists. Science fiction storytellers were clearly inspired by these concepts, and a few years later, in 1968, Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey developed a model for a space station that was in that similar wheel shape. The year before, 1967, the first issue of Valérian and Laureline was published, and according to Valerian film representatives, Point Central in the comic, a vast space station that lies at the crossroads of space, inspired Alpha in this film adaptation. That concept actually appeared a few years later in the 1975 comic Valérian Volume 6, Ambassador of the Shadows. Right now, NASA and United States officials have only promised to fund the ISS through 2024, so it's uncertain what the future will hold for the orbiting lab. But as crews from around the world work together to research and live in space, science fiction writers have inspiration to continue writing tales of the International Space Station, expanding someday into that kind of vibrant metropolis. Vibrant, that's a great word to use to describe the trailer this broadcaster watched in awe. Unbelievable concepts, incredible imagery. Check it out. You'll find a link later at ufoheadlinenews.com. Oh, we should add that Justin Chang, the film critic for the Los Angeles Times, didn't really take to this film, as they say. His comment was, pick up your 3D glasses at the door with one hand and drop your brain off with the other. In other words, for him, there was lots of vivid quality to look at, but not much in the content. Go figure. Here's something to figure. A few weeks ago, we covered the story in Florida. The headline was, "A woman discovers treasure trove of rare space documents in the trash." Oh, let's recap it. A Navy veteran accidentally stumbled upon a number of rare documents and images from the height of the space age in the trash outside of a home in Florida. Former aviation electrician Yvette Quinn discovered the documents and turned them over to WKMG News 6 in Florida. She was concerned that the information had been just left on the curb. The documents contained notes and images from a variety of projects, including early drones, early renderings of lunar modules, the space shuttle, and a Martian spacecraft. We're not sure what that means exactly. In addition to such items as a rare Gemini Titan II press manual. These documents and images in question originated from the Martin Marietta Corporation, which specialized in aerospace engineering, chemicals, electronics during the height of the space race. The company later merged with Lockheed Corporation. Lockheed Martin is how we know it now. That happened in 1994. The station has since donated these items found by Yvette Quinn to the American Space Museum in Titusville, Florida. It turns out there really wasn't anything that classified. Well, there's nothing classified in this, but something's happened again. Here's the headline: Old NASA computers, tapes found in dead man's basement. This source is highly respectable. It's space.com, and this is written by Mike Wall, who is their senior writer. 2 huge Apollo-era NASA computers and more than 300 data recording tapes were found in the Pittsburgh basement of a dead engineer. This happened actually in late 2015, but for some reason it's only breaking now. In November of 2015, a scrap dealer was invited to clear out the basement of a recently deceased IBM engineer who did some work for NASA at the height of the space race. The dealer found about 325 magnetic data tapes and 2 giant computers, both of which were marked, quote, NASA property, end quotes. The scrap dealer contacted NASA to inform the agency of his find, and NASA's Office of the Inspector General performed an investigation. What happened next was the publication Ars Technica. They obtained the Office of the Inspector.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
Ooh, all right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
General's report through a Freedom of Information Act request. This deceased engineer's heir told the scrap dealer, quote, "Please tell NASA these items were not stolen. They belong to IBM Allegheny Center, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. During the 1968 to 1972 timeframe, IBM was getting rid of the items, so the engineer asked if he could have them, and he was told he could have them." End quotes. The relevant names here have been redacted in the Office of Inspector General's report. NASA officials told the deceased engineer's family the agency doesn't need the computers back. After further investigation, an agency archivist determined that 93 of these tapes contained data from Pioneer 10 or Pioneer 11, those flyby missions to Jupiter and Saturn they launched in the early 1970s. A few of the other tapes recorded from the Pioneer 8, Pioneer 9, Helios 1, and Intelsat 4 missions, but most of the tapes, about 215 of them, just couldn't be identified. An archivist recommended that all the tapes, which were moldy and in generally poor condition, be destroyed because they didn't contain anything of historical significance. There'll be a link to that NASA Office of the Inspector General report and the full story from the fellows at Ars Technica. Find those links later at ufoheadlinenews.com. Speaking of NASA, here's a striking headline from the Charlotte Observer out of North Carolina. North Carolina Island's mysterious birth appears on NASA satellite images. Mark Price gets the byline here. NASA has released satellite images that show North Carolina's newly formed Shelley Island, born in November. The photographs acquired by the Operational Land Imager on the Landsat 8 satellite shows the sands that grew into the island that first registered in November of 2016 off the shoal area off Cape Point. There's a second image taken January of 2017. It shows waves were clearly breaking on the shallow region off the Cape's tip. The site of those breakers is where that island eventually formed. There's a third image taken just this month. It shows the island clearly formed and nearly a mile in length. Quote, "What exactly causes a shallow region to become exposed is a deep question, and is one that's difficult to speculate on without exact observations." End quotes. That's from geomorphologist Andrew Ashton. He reported on this for NASA. One possibility, he said, is, quote, "water levels going down after storm-driven waters pile up sediment to near the surface." Shelley Island came to the nation's attention about 2 months ago. It's become known for being mysterious and forbidding, including the news on January 13th that a World War II-era military training device washed up on shore. That device was shaped like a torpedo. It prompted an evacuation of the island, which is popular with tourists. The island got its name, by the way, unofficially Shelley Island, because it's littered with numerous and well-preserved shells. But it's also a treacherous place to visit, with a deadly current separating it from Cape Point. The waters in this channel are known to be popular with sharks, by the way. Experts say the island could be swept away by the next big storm off the coast, and until then, the property is under the jurisdiction of Dare County, North Carolina. A new island. That is something new indeed. Here's a headline we couldn't resist. Yes, it's the NewYorkPost.com, but here we go. Ancient religious stones hiding secret message only visible at night. There isn't any byline here, but we'll read it anyway. Mysterious messages that are only visible at night have been found at an ancient British religious site. The incredible find suggests that our Stone Age ancestors left behind hidden carvings designed to be viewed in the darkness. However, we don't yet know what these messages symbolize and why they were carved on the rocks. Archaeologists, led by Dr. Andy Jones of the Cornwall Archaeological Unit, found 105 engravings on an axe-shaped stone called a quoit, that's spelled Quoit, which lies in Hendraburnick Down near Davidstow. The site appears to have been used during the late Neolithic era, which is regarded as the end of the Stone Age, as well as during the early Bronze Age, about 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. It was used for strange rituals involving the smashing of quartz blocks. Quote, during the field work, it became apparent that the rock art was far more extensive than had been first thought, and that it was most evident when viewed in low sunlight from the southwest or by moonlight, end quotes. That's what the academics wrote in their journal Time and Mind. It continues, quote, it is suggested that the smashed vein quartz may have been used during nighttime rituals. Photogrammetric recording, making detailed measurements using a series of photos, revealed the site to be the most decorated stone in southern Britain, and that suggests that rather than being pre-planned, the art accreted over time, end quotes. Ancient cultures often associated darkness with the supernatural and the heightening of the senses, meaning that Hendraburnick quoit could have played host to strange pagan religious rituals. Jones also found fragments of quartz at that site. When two pieces of quartz are smashed together, they emit a brief glowing light. Quote, the smashed quartz at Hendraburnick could have been used as part of a nighttime activity on the site in order to release the luminescent properties of the quartz around the monument, revealing this art in a particular way. After the ritual, the broken pieces, once they'd fallen to the ground, could have effectively formed a wider platform, an arc, which would have continued to glisten around it in the moonlight, thereby adding to the aura of the site, end quotes. Hendraburnick Down is the source of the River Camel, which may have made it a potent spiritual and symbolic site. The carvings on the fallen stone are known as cup and ring marks. Hendraburnick quoit has been at the center of a long controversy because some academics believe it's an ancient long barrow used to bury the dead. But other experts believe the stone is a natural formation, and still others believe it was actually a dumping ground used during medieval times. Dr. Andy Jones and his team found a layer of slate beneath the 35,000-pound quoit, indicating it was dragged there from a site down the river valley and is not a natural formation. Quoits were found across the ancient world and often feature an indentation surrounded by concentric circles, although this Cornish one, looks slightly different. The markings were mostly located in northern Europe, but similar patterns have been spotted as far away as Hawaii and Australia. Dr. Jones told The Telegraph that he expects similar markings to be found at other British sites. Quote, I think the new marks show that this ancient site was used at night, and it is likely that other sites were as well. Stonehenge does have markings, and I think that many more would be found at sites across the country if people were to look for them at different light. We might say that's a very bright idea. So remember Normie, that monster emerging from Lake Norman in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina? Well, here's an update. This is from the Charlotte Observer, written by Mark Price. Headline, another clue emerges on Lake Norman monster with reports of, quote, enormous fish, end quotes. A report this month that yet another person saw a dinosaur in the murky waters of man-made Lake Norman has prompted someone else to step forward with a clue about what this creature might be. In a July 14th posting on the official LakeNormanMonster.com website, a diver from Clemens, North Carolina, claims to have seen an enormous fish in the lake 20 years ago. That diver, who didn't give his name, said he was looking for old bottles among the buildings that were submerged when the lake was first created. Adding to the creepiness factor, his light found the fish in the black waters inside one of those submerged buildings. Here's what he writes, quote, it was at least 8 feet long and 3 feet across the mouth. We hovered in the water for a good 5 minutes with our lights on it, not believing what we were seeing. I've never seen a freshwater fish that big. The only thing it did was to pump its gills and open and shut its mouth slowly, almost as if he didn't even see us, end quotes. He guesses it might have been a catfish, quote, a damn big scary one too, end quotes. But he suggested it could be the monster. He said, quote, that fish might be a lot bigger in the 20-odd years since then, end quotes. Speculation of the possible origin of this famed monster has increased over the past week after a website called cryptozoology.com reported that a 35-year-old Mecklenburg County man claimed he saw a dinosaur-like creature 2 weeks ago traveling on a boat with friends. The man described that creature as splashing around in the water, 10 feet long, reminiscent of the mythical Loch Ness monster, Nessie. This thing was visible for about a minute before it dropped below the surface. Doubters believe the creature, if there is one at all, is a giant catfish or even an alligator, or maybe something called an alligator gar fish. One skeptic on the LakeNormanMonster.com asks, couldn't this be a sturgeon? They get massive and do closely resemble a crocodile, spines on their back, large bumpy scales. The Observer has covered the ongoing Lake Norman sightings. They date back nearly 50 years. A few dozen witnesses have posted sightings at LakeNormanMonster.com. Descriptions range from a dinosaur-like creature to a giant snake with fins. Oh, and don't forget those thick whiskers. Most describe the creature, Normie, as looking like Nessie, that famed Loch Ness monster that allegedly inhabits Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. Quote, descriptions of Normie vary from sighting to sighting and range from a crocodilian-like creature to the more classic three-humped serpent. Most that have seen the Lake Norman monster seem to agree the beast is more fish-like, with a slender body, thick whisker-like appendages, flippers, and that raggedy-looking dorsal fin. We'll keep our eyes on the area of Mecklenburg County and again see what surfaces at Lake Norman. Let's go from North Carolina now, just a little bit east, a little bit south, and we won't stop till we come to St. Louis, Missouri, or St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, you decide, gentle listeners. It's a black triangle sighting. It's MUFON case number 85216. It's an older one. It happened 2010 on November 24th, but it didn't get reported till July 19th, 2017. In summary, the witness says, dark triangle with 3 green lights on the corners and a red pulsating light on the rear end. Sighting specifics offer us a viewing distance unknown. The altitude was over 500 feet and there wasn't any cloud cover. The sighting duration was 10 seconds long, and so understandably, the object features get that vague description of none. Object flight path is straight line path, and quite obviously, this thing was shaped like a triangle. Here's the account in the first-person unedited words of our witness. I was outside my apartment looking for satellites when I saw the object. It was dark, triangle-shaped. 3 greenish-white lights on the corners and a red pulsating light on the back end. It made no noise. It was flying across the sky in a straight line effortlessly. It reminded me of how an air hockey puck slides across an air hockey table. It appeared to be flying fairly low to the ground. Green lights, not very bright. This thing had a fuzzy haze around the edge that made it hard to look at. I watched it for 8 to 10 seconds until it appeared to vanish into thin air. Shook up, I went inside and locked all my doors. A few years later, I started a job inspecting aerospace parts, mostly military, for cracks under UV lights. It recently dawned on me, when inspecting titanium parts under a UV light, I see that same fuzzy haze effect that this object had. The fuzz effect is very hard on the eyes, so we use UV blocking glasses to inspect titanium parts. If the lights on this craft were UV, and the craft was made of titanium, that would explain this fuzz I witnessed. I thought what I saw that night could very possibly be military. Cool sighting reported rather late or not. Titanium and UV. That's worth a Google. But now we've got to fly because that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Off the Beaten Path for the UFO Headline News. Follow today's broadcast at ufoheadlinenews.com. Take care of each other. We're all in this together. This is Carol Carl. See you tomorrow.